It's a funny thing when you find out the ultimate villain in your favorite movie was actually just mind controlled the whole time.
Oh, yeah. Like, they weren't the real monster at all.
Exactly. You spend the entire story hating them, only to realize at the very end that it was the company they were keeping that was doing all the damage.
We are incredibly quick to judge based on association. I mean, especially when that association has caused decades of public health devastation.
Right. And today, we are turning that exact lens onto a topic that is guaranteed to raise some eyebrows. We are taking a deep dive into what might be, well, the most stigmatized, controversial molecule on the planet.
Nicotine.
Nicotine. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're asking you to step back and look at a massive stack of medical journals, historical analyses, clinical trial data, and expert interviews.
And there's a lot of it.
There is so much.
Yeah.
And our mission here is to completely decouple the molecule nicotine from the toxic delivery system we all know it by, which is tobacco smoke, and uncover its hidden and honestly paradoxical role in human health.
But before we get any further, we really need to make something exceptionally clear.
Yeah, Tizu.
The material we are analyzing today contains highly controversial medical hypotheses, specifically regarding COVID-19, viral treatments, and government policies. We are entirely impartial here.
100%.
We are not endorsing any medical viewpoints, we are not suggesting any treatments, and we are not taking sides on government bans or regulations. Our only goal is to explore the fascinating, sometimes conflicting data provided in the text and help you understand the biological mechanisms being discussed.
Because to even begin to understand how we might have misunderstood nicotine, we have to travel way back. Like long before big tobacco, long before convenience stores.
We have to look at how humans historically interacted with this plant versus how modern industry completely corrupted it.
Exactly. The historical data takes us back to around 6000 BCE in the Americas, looking at a plant called Nicotiana rustica.
Right, the wild tobacco.
Yeah. And for indigenous peoples, this wasn't a quick hit on a smoke break. This was a sacred, ceremonial, and medicinal plant.
And the method of use, historically, is critical to understanding its physiological effects. Traditional tobacco was used sparingly in rituals.
It wasn't a daily habit.
No, not at all. It was often burned to produce smoke that wasn't habitually inhaled deep into the lungs 20 or 30 times a day like a modern cigarette.
Right.
It was utilized by healers in North and South America to treat pain, respiratory conditions, and even wound healing. It was respected as a powerful botanical compound, not, engineered as a daily, inescapable crutch.
Which is a universal way from what happened when the modern commercial industry got their hands on it. I mean, the contrast is staggering. Modern commercial cigarette smoke contains over 7,000 chemicals.
It's hard to even wrap your head around that number.
7,000.
Yeah.
And at least 86 of those are known carcinogens.
Which really raises the fundamental question of our entire discussion. How much of the addiction and the harm is the nicotine itself, and how much is the engineering? Dr. Brian Ardis dug into FDA research and development documents from the 1970s. And those documents revealed that the FDA had approved 599 different chemical additives for the tobacco industry to use in their products.
Okay, let's unpack this. Wait, so the industry literally engineered a delivery system with 599 extra chemicals just to hijack our brains. Are we saying pure nicotine isn't the true villain of addiction here?
Well, the pharmacological data strongly suggests it's not the sole villain. Among those 599 approved additives are chemicals called pyrazines.
Pyrazines.
Yeah, and pyrazines aren't just flavorings. They are specifically engineered to fundamentally change how the body processes the smoke.
How so?
They act as bronchodilators, literally forcing your airways to expand so you can inhale the smoke deeper into your lung tissue.
Oh, wow.
And they also alter the pH of the smoke, which essentially freebases the nicotine, allowing it to cross the blood-brain barrier in seconds rather than minutes.
So they took a naturally occurring plant molecule and strapped a chemical rocket to it to ensure it hits the brain with, unnatural speed and force.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. The intense, crippling, addictive nature of modern smoking is a result of that engineered chemical cocktail.
Right.
When you decouple the nicotine molecule from the combustion of the leaf and from those 599 additives, its pharmacological profile changes entirely. By itself, isolated from the smoke, it behaves very differently in the human body.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
Because if the industry went to all that trouble to engineer these chemicals just to get nicotine into our brains, it makes you wonder what is waiting for it when it gets there.
Oh, the body's ready for it.
Right, because it turns out our bodies are essentially hardwired to receive it. We literally have a receptor system named after this plant, the nicotinic acetylcholine receptors, or NACHRs for short.
Yeah, your nervous system is packed with these tiny gates, known as ligand-gated ion channels.
Okay.
Normally, your body makes its own internal chemical key, a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, and that key unlocks these gates to send lightning-fast signals across your brain and muscles.
But nicotine fits the same lock.
Exactly. Nicotine, this exogenous molecule from a plant, has a molecular shape that fits those exact same locks with incredibly high affinity.
So our brains basically have these hyper-specific locks, and nicotine happens to be a master key perfectly carved by nature to fit them, turning on the lights in the brain's focus centers.
What's fascinating here is it doesn't just turn on a single light, it acts as a master switchboard for the entire nervous system.
Oh, interesting.
When nicotine binds to these receptors, particularly in the brain, it orchestrates a massive network of neurotransmitter releases. Dr. Andrew Huberman breaks this down by explaining that nicotine triggers the release of dopamine directly in the nucleus accumbens.
The nucleus accumbens, that's the reward center, right?
Exactly. That is your brain's reward and motivation center. It provides a transient but very real increase in alertness, focus, and a feeling of well-being. But it doesn't stop at dopamine. It simultaneously modulates serotonin, glutamate, and GABA.
I think this is why neurologists often refer to pure nicotine as a nootropic, right? Like a cognitive enhancer.
Yes, absolutely.
The term that kept popping up in the research was pharmacological chaperone. And the Vanderbilt University Medical Center study is what really shifted my perspective on this.
That study is incredible.
It really is. They didn't just look at healthy brains trying to pull an all-nighter. They looked at people with mild cognitive impairment, specifically those carrying the APOE4 gene, which is a major risk factor for Alzheimer's disease.
Right.
And they found that pure nicotine significantly improved their attention, memory, and cognitive processing.
Well, in neurodegenerative conditions like Alzheimer's, there is a progressive physical loss of these nicotinic acetylcholine receptors.
Also, the locks themselves are disappearing.
Exactly. The brain's signaling system is literally breaking down. Nicotine essentially steps in to stimulate the remaining receptors. As a pharmacological chaperone, it helps stabilize misfolded proteins and enhances the signal-to-noise ratio in the brain.
Wow.
It is essentially turning up the volume on neural communication that is actively fading away.
But this master key doesn't just boost focus and memory. It turns out it also regulates the body's internal alarm system, which has massive implications for chronic disease.
It does, and this brings us to a highly specific subtype of that receptor we just mentioned, called the alpha-7 nicotinic receptor.
Okay.
When nicotine binds to the alpha-7 receptor, it activates what is known as the cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway.
Okay, cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway is a mouthful. But the way it functions is incredible. It is less like a biological process and more like a fire suppression system in a building, right?
That is exactly how it functions. When your immune system detects a threat, it releases pro-inflammatory cytokines like TNF-alpha and interleukin-6.
The inflammatory alarms.
Right. Think of these cytokines as a chemical fire. They are necessary to burn out a localized infection, but if they aren't turned off, that fire spreads and destroys healthy tissue.
And the alpha-7 receptor stops it.
Exactly. When nicotine activates that alpha-7 receptor, it acts as a circuit breaker. It halts the production of those destructive pro-inflammatory cytokines while simultaneously preserving the body's anti-inflammatory signals. It basically tells a hyperactive immune system to stand down before it burns the house down.
And chronic inflammation is the core driver of so many devastating diseases. Like, the research points out an inverse relationship between smoking and Parkinson's disease.
Yes, the statistics on that are undeniable.
Statistically, heavier smokers actually have a lower risk of developing Parkinson's. And pure nicotine is even being studied right now as a potential treatment for Tourette's, ADHD, and schizophrenia.
Okay.
But I have to push back here.
Go ahead.
If nicotine is so incredibly neuroprotective, why are smokers notoriously unhealthy? How does the body reconcile getting a healing molecule wrapped in a poison delivery system?
It comes entirely down to the delivery mechanism. The delivery system, meaning the combustion of paper and tobacco leaves, the carbon monoxide, the tar, or even the vegetable glycerin and propylene glycol found in vape liquids. All of that causes immense systemic damage to the vascular system and the lungs.
Right.
That systemic destruction completely overwhelms the localized cellular benefits that the nicotine molecule is triggering. You are getting the neuroprotective key, sure, but you are swallowing a hand grenade to get it.
The difference between the systemic damage from smoking and the cellular benefits of nicotine becomes incredibly obvious and highly controversial when we look at how the body fights viruses.
Oh, the clinical data regarding viral interactions is where we see the most stark contrast and the most intense debate among researchers.
For sure. Let's look at the smoker's paradox observed during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Right.
Early on, researchers, including a cardiologist named Dr. Konstantinos Varsalinos, noticed a bizarre statistical anomaly in Chinese hospitals.
It really threw everyone for a loop.
The data showed that while roughly 26% of the Chinese population smoked, only 6.5% of the hospitalized COVID-19 patients were smokers. It was completely counterintuitive. You would assume a severe respiratory virus would absolutely devastate a population of heavy smokers.
The working hypothesis that emerged to explain this anomaly was the displacement theory.
Displacement theory. Okay.
Some researchers hypothesized that the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein might actually enter cells by binding to those exact same nicotinic acetylcholine receptors we've been discussing.
Wait, really? The same locks?
Yes, and because nicotine binds to those receptors with such a high affinity, it locks in very tightly, the theory suggests that nicotine might literally physically block the virus from attaching and entering the cell.
It's like putting a piece of chewing gum inside a keyhole, so the virus's key can't even fit inside the door. And because of this theory, clinical trials were actually launched using nicotine patches for severe COVID patients.
They were, yeah.
Though, we should note a specific trial evaluating nicotine patches for critically ill patients who were already on mechanical ventilation showed no significant reduction in mortality.
Which highlights a crucial limitation in pharmacology. Nicotine is not a miracle cure.
Right.
In late-stage severe disease where a patient is already ventilated, the chemical fire of inflammation has already burned the house down, immense tissue damage has occurred. Blocking the receptor after the fact doesn't reverse acute respiratory distress syndrome.
That makes sense.
But the complexity deepens even further when we compare this COVID hypothesis to another common respiratory virus, the flu.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The contradiction here is glaring. On one hand, you have Dr. Brian Ardis claiming that wearing a daily low-dose nicotine patch has prevented him from getting colds or the flu for over 5 years.
Right.
But then we look at a very rigorous mouse study published in Frontiers focusing on aerosolized nicotine like what you inhale from an e-cigarette in influenza. And that study found the exact opposite of protection.
It's completely the opposite.
It showed that aerosolized nicotine drastically impaired the lung's ability to clear the flu virus. It lowered a protective mucus protein called MUC5AC, and it downregulated the function of cilia. Plus, the data notes an increased risk of herpes simplex virus for smokers. How on earth can we have data saying it protects against one virus, but another study says it destroys your lung's ability to clear the flu? How can both be true?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the conflict resolves entirely when you look at how the molecule is entering the body. It is all about the delivery mechanism and the difference between localized immune suppression versus systemic immune regulation.
Okay, so if inhaling it paralyzes the lung defenses, but a patch bypasses the lungs entirely, is that why the patch doesn't trigger the same vulnerability to the flu?
Precisely. When you inhale nicotine, either through a combustible cigarette or an e-cigarette vaporized with propylene glycol, you are coating the delicate mucosal lining of your lungs with an immunosuppressant.
That sounds terrible.
It is. Locally, inside the lung tissue, it paralyzes the cilia, those tiny hair-like structures that constantly sweep debris and viruses out of your airway.
Right, the sweepers.
Yeah. And it halts the production of MUC5AC, which is the protective slime that traps pathogens. And most importantly, it suppresses the initial innate immune alarm, specifically interferons, that your lungs desperately need to signal an attack by an invading flu virus. By silencing the alarm right at the point of entry, the flu virus replicates unchecked.
So vaping or smoking literally disarms the security guards at the front gate of your respiratory system.
Exactly. But using a transdermal patch or mucosal gum changes the biological math entirely. A patch delivers the molecule systemically through the skin, bypassing the respiratory tract.
Which means the lungs are safe.
Yes. This means the lungs keep their local immune defenses fully operational. The cilia keep beating. The mucus keeps protecting. The interferons remain on high alert, while the rest of your nervous system potentially gains the systemic anti-inflammatory benefits of that alpha-7 receptor activation. You get the neurological benefit without the local paralysis of the lung tissue.
Which perfectly explains why the delivery method is the absolute deciding factor between a poison and a medicine. And because of this massive distinction, patients and researchers are now turning to microdoses that bypass the lungs entirely.
We are seeing the rapid rise of a profound citizen science movement right now. Out of pure desperation to manage chronic, complex conditions where traditional medicine has hit a wall, patients are taking matters into their own hands.
Like the nicotine test group, right?
Yes, groups like the Nicotine Test on Facebook have amassed over 30,000 members. These are individuals utilizing very low-dose transdermal nicotine patches to treat long-term post-viral symptoms, chronic fatigue syndrome, often referred to as ME, and severe debilitating brain fog.
I mean, if you are listening to this and you've ever struggled with severe brain fog, the kind where you literally can't remember the word for refrigerator or focus on a screen for more than 5 minutes, you can understand why people are turning to these online communities out of pure desperation.
Absolutely.
They're working with doctors like Dr. Marko Leitsky and Dr. Anna Sata, who are actively helping to guide this clinical protocol. And the protocol is fascinating because it is the exact antithesis of how a smoker uses nicotine.
Right, the doses are tiny.
Incredibly low doses. We are talking about taking the absolute lowest dose batch available and cutting it in half, or sometimes only exposing a tiny sliver of the adhesive backing. And crucially, they only wear it for a few hours a day.
That intermittent microdosed exposure is highly deliberate. The biological goal is to stimulate those alpha-7 receptors just enough to trigger that cholinergic anti-inflammatory fire suppression system and get the neuroprotective benefits, but to take the patch off long before the body builds a tolerance.
To avoid addiction.
Yes. If you flood the brain with a stimulant 247, the brain responds by downregulating the receptors. It essentially unscrews the light bulbs to deal with the surge in electricity. By using it intermittently, they are actively preventing the brain from downregulating those receptors, avoiding the addiction and the overstimulation that comes with heavy, continuous use.
But the medical literature is very careful to issue stark warnings here. This is not a magic silver bullet, and it is definitely not for everyone.
Absolutely not. The clinical data details highly specific adverse reactions. For instance, in patients dealing with long COVID who have developed a dysautonomia condition called hyperadrenergic POTS, which involves an excess of adrenaline pooling in the system, nicotine can be actively detrimental.
Oh, because it's a stimulant.
Exactly. Nicotine stimulates the release of norepinephrine and adrenaline. For someone whose nervous system is already stuck in a fight-or-flight adrenaline flood, adding nicotine to the mix can trigger severe cascading symptom flare-ups.
There is also the very real danger of the masking effect too, right? Because nicotine is a potent stimulant that increases dopamine and generally makes you feel alert. And, well, some chronic fatigue patients might feel so much better that they overexert themselves.
That is a huge risk.
They push way past their body's actual cellular energy limits, and when they take the patch off, they experience a devastating crash known as post-exertional malaise.
Which is why we must reiterate the absolute consensus across every single medical professional in this data. Under no circumstances should anyone pick up smoking or vaping to try and obtain a therapeutic dose of nicotine.
Never.
The systemic destruction of the delivery system will always outweigh the localized neurological benefits of the molecule.
So what does this all mean? It sounds to me like after decades of collateral damage from the tobacco industry, we're finally learning to use nicotine as a targeted medical laser rather than the toxic carpet bomb of a combustible cigarette.
That's a great analogy. The ultimate goal of pharmacology right now is to isolate that incredibly powerful benefit of the alpha-7 receptor activation, the profound anti-inflammatory and neuroprotective properties, without any of the accompanying addiction, cardiovascular stress, or toxicity.
Right.
Science is looking at the nicotine molecule not as the final destination, but as a critical stepping stone. It's a template provided by nature to help us engineer future, safer drugs that do exactly what nicotine does for the brain, but with absolute precision.
Which brings us back to you, listening to this.
Yeah.
Think about everything we have just unpacked. We have this molecule that has been relentlessly, and in many ways justifiably, stigmatized for decades because of the company it keeps.
Yep.
But when you strip away the smoke, the tar, and the 599 engineered chemical additives, you are left with a master key to the human brain. Does knowing the science behind these receptors change your perspective on it? Have we been writing off a potentially life-changing neurological tool simply out of guilt by association?
It leaves us with a rather profound evolutionary puzzle to consider. Nicotine is, at its core, a plant's natural pesticide.
Right.
It evolved as a botanical defense mechanism to overstimulate the nervous systems of insects and stop them from eating tobacco leaves. Yet, this simple evolutionary defense mechanism happens to perfectly and exquisitely fit the focus, memory, and inflammation receptors of the complex human brain.
It is wild.
If a highly stigmatized molecule like nicotine hides such profound, untapped medical potential, what other demonized or toxic compounds in nature are sitting right under our noses, waiting for science to strip away the stigma and give them a second look?
It really makes you wonder what else we've completely misjudged just because we didn't understand the mechanism. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We will see you next time.